right? It's great for those little details. I can't even argue with that. Though. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Is It Worth It, where I go around the world and the internet looking for supplies to make your life a little bit better, or for you to enjoy the craft just this much more. And today we're going to something that I generally do not like. Okay, so for those of you who know me, know that I don't like inking, but I'm always on the search for some type of utensil to actually make it easier or more enjoyable for me. And today I have found these sign pens. Okay, these are from Pentel Art. They're sign pens, and they say they have a flexible nib, and I'm very interested in seeing which ones work well. And I have the micro version and the regular version. So to see which one will actually work will be very, very interesting to me. And hopefully we can find an inking utensil that will be both fun and, beneficial to us all who need to ink our work. So, come on. Let's go check it out. Alright, so as you can see, once again, a lot of the packaging that we're getting is just very simple. A little chipboard with plastic, covering to keep it in, mostly so that you can actually see what you're getting, which I think is always cool. But, packaging wise, not really anything there. This is the sign pen, one stylo, one pluma. It says we've got smooth flowing water-based dye ink, unique durable brush tip, ideal for artists and anyone who enjoys drawing and sketching. And then the micron says micro synthetic brush hair tip, create tiny hairline strokes to wide lines, ideal for hand lettering and calligraphy, notable for the use of sketchbooks and small miniature illustrations. So these should be interesting. They're, like I said, they're both a sign pen, so we will see how these work. I'm going to try the normal one first, and then we'll go to the micron pen. Alright, so the pen itself is actually small, right? So that's kind of odd for me, especially with a person with bigger hands. So it seems like a smaller pen. So if you compare it, I might be wrong here, but see, if you compare it to just a regular pen, right, it's a smaller pen. So that's something that you got to keep in mind, that it is actually a smaller size. The brush itself, it has an interesting plastic feel to it, right? Doesn't feel super plasticky, but it's a very smooth plastic. So if you're okay with that texture. Looking at the nib, right, it's one of those plastic synthetic brushes. It seems pretty stable, right? The brush itself is sturdy. See if we can post the cap. Nice, right? Easy. Got a nice stick to it. It doesn't snap, but it's very snug when it goes in there, so you don't have to worry about that. And then the brush itself, it has a lot of edges, but it kind of still makes it roll. So you got to watch out for that. You definitely want to post the cap, so that way it'll stop. Okay, and then the snap, it's got a nice little snap to it on the front side, so that you can make sure that it doesn't dry out. And then let's see, getting close to the end of this book. All right. Okay. So, let's see. So, the brush itself seems fairly nice. One post cap. It's got a nice, once you get it started, so the first couple we did, the ink wasn't flowing all the way, so that's something you got to keep in mind. But it does have a flex brush, so even though it is a plastic nib, you can really go from thick to thin. But it does seem as though the brush itself, so the nib itself, is a bit soft. So you have to be very conscious about the fact that when you push down on the pen, it's going to give you a really thick line. So this one might not be super ideal for the itty bitty lines, but it can give you a nice variation, right? So if you start off light and then push, you can get a nice line. What I've noticed is that if you go slow with this pen, the ink flows really, really well. It's got a nice, it's not necessarily opaque black, but it is a lot darker than a lot of ink that I've seen from most brushes, especially if you're doing smaller lines, right? If you're doing the small lines, it's really nice and opaque black, so that gives you a nice line. But what I have noticed is that if you go faster, it tends to not, like if you try and flick it and go up, see how the brush, see that? But see how the brush kind of, it breaks apart there. So you have to be careful with that, because you don't want it to fray apart. And I'm seeing that no matter what. So if you flick it to try and get that nice, the nice feathering, it tends to break up, so you'd have to go back in and touch that up. So that's not necessarily one of the best features of this pen, but if you go slow, right, it allows you to have a nice tight clean line if you decide to go slow. So if you're trying to do these nice frayed lines like hair or eyelashes, if you take it rather slowly, then the ink will flow real nice out of it and you can control it and make it a nice feather. But I'm more concerned about the sketching aspect, since it said that it was good for sketching, but when I try and make a curve, the ink is not able to actually stay consistent, right? So it doesn't, the faster you go, the less consistent the ink is. And so that's kind of an issue if I'm trying to sketch, right? And then I just get these very open areas where it just kind of, the ink just doesn't go through. And that's not a good thing, right? Especially if you're saying that it is for inking, or I mean for sketching, but the ink won't actually follow, right? Like it's not consistent, because if I have to go really, really slow to ink, that's not a sketch pen, right? That would be an inking pen, which I think this pen would be good if you have a pre-drawn thing and you want to come in and control the line. I think that it would be very helpful. The brush itself is not, the nib for me though is a bit too soft, so you'd have to play around with it a lot more to see if it works for you, because I don't think I would be able to control this line as much as I'd want to when it came time to ink. So there's that. Alright, let's try this Micron one. I'm interested in this. I don't normally do small itty bitty details, so to see what kind of brush this is going to be interesting. So the brush itself, right, they're the same size because it is a sign pen, so they're both sign pens. This one is black, while this one has sparkle gray. Oh wow, look at that nib. Alright, look at that. That is a very long and thin line. I do believe that is a brush, right? It did say it was synthetic hairs, so that brush is, I mean, that thing is long. Whoop, right? And let's see if the snap is not as, it's a double snap, so there's two places for it to snap. So it is, it is secure, but you don't hear it as much. It doesn't feel as though it's really on there. And then of course it posts just fine, so that's good. So I'm worried about this brush. Like I'm actually worried that I might break it because it looks so thin. But you can get, I mean, if you're the type of person who wants to get really small, thin lines, like really itty bitty lines, then you can definitely, like, this brush is for you. The only issue that I'm seeing is, like, just like in the other sign pen, is that the ink doesn't, look at that. The ink doesn't flow well at all if you're moving halfway fast, right? Like this, now it might be a manufacturing issue, but look at that. Like, it just completely frays out. Like, the ink can't even keep up with it, you know? But, I mean, yeah, if you're going fast, it is not a brush that really likes to go fast. Like, this is definitely something that you can make itty bitty lines, right? Like, so if you need some really strong details, right, and you're doing really tiny, like if you're doing a lot of hatching and you need to get in there to like the eye and have little itty bitty details, this is actually a really good pen for if you're doing fine details. Like, you can see that it's really nice, and it's really nice to see these kind of little itty bitty details, right? But it's not necessarily a brush for inking. I mean, not for inking, for sketching, right? But if, like I said, if you are a person who likes really fine detailed hatch marks, and you're trying to come in here and make little itty bitty lines to show that transition, then this one is actually great for that, right? And it did say that it is meant for fine details, so this one is actually holding up to what it's saying, what it says it'll do. So that's good. But then it also says that it's good for sketching, and it is not, right? Because you have to be really, once again, like really slow for this. It's well, I mean, for calligraphy, right, when it's trying to do lettering, which is also what it said. So that's good when you're kind of going slow to make sure that it looks right. That'll work. But, you know, for sketching, when you're just trying to come in and throw in lines and details and stuff like that, this is not a good pen for that, right? It's great for those little details. Like, I can't even argue with that. Though, if you're trying to do little itty bitty detailed lines, this is great. Like, this pen is absolutely fantastic. But if that's not what you're trying to do, this is not a sketch pen, right? Like, both of these pens are not sketch pens. Alright, so we just got done reviewing the Pentel Arts sign pens, and I mean, they say they're for sketching, and they're not. They're just not. Everything just kind of broke apart, and if you say that it's for sketching, you have to be able to allow the ink to move really quickly through the nib, through the brush, and the fact that it constantly broke apart as far as the ink flow went, like if you went really slow, like I could see these being inking pens, right? When you're actually trying to make sure that everything is nice and clean and stuff like that, they're really good for that, because you got to slow down and take your time. But if you are trying to ink quickly, these are not it. The one that I would say that held up its end of the bargain was the micro pen, because it said that it was for little itty bitty details, right? And so for that, I would say that it does do what it says, and it would be worth it, because it does. Like, if you're trying to do really small details very slowly and stuff like that, it works just fine. The brush is fine, but it is not for sketching. Like, that's just all there is to that. So in my opinion, these pens, they're not worth it. You can definitely try them out. I'll post a link down below so that you can get them if you want to try them, especially the micro pen, because that one, it did what it said it was supposed to do outside of being a sketch pen. So you can definitely try them out, but in my opinion, they're not worth it. Well, that concludes today's episode. I hope that you got something out of it. I hope that it is helpful for you so that if you are looking for materials that you can check out these videos and then go, oh, that seems like a good one, or that one, thank goodness I don't have to do that one. I was about to get that, but seeing this demonstration, man, no more. So thank you guys so very much for all the support. If you have any suggestions about what type of materials I should be trying next, please drop it in the comments below. I will definitely be adding it to the list. And if you are new to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you will be notified as soon as a new Is It Worth It is released, and you can check out the product and the product review. Thank you guys so very much, and I will see you at the next episode.